It's been a whirlwind week for the stock market and trade relations here in the U.S. after President Trump made due on his tariff threats against Canada, Mexico, and China Tuesday. And just 48 hours after his move, Trump walked back a significant amount of the imposed tariffs, announcing exemptions on a number of goods for 1 month. But in another reversal today, seemed to renew his tariff threats.
Canada has been ripping us off for years on tariffs for lumber and for dairy products. 250%, nobody ever talks about that. 250% tariff, which is taking advantage of our farmers, so that's not going to happen anymore. They'll be met with the exact same tariff unless they drop it. And that's what reciprocal means. And we may do it as early as today, or we'll wait till Monday or Tuesday.
Joining me now is the Hill's congressional reporter Mychael Schnell to help make sense of the swift reversal. Mychael, thanks so much for joining us. I feel like I have whiplash at this point, going back and forth with these tariff threats and, of course, renewing those attacks on Canada today. One country that we haven't seen as much of about face on is China. It has yet to see any relief from these tariffs being imposed. What has their response been?
Bring it on, essentially. We heard from the Chinese embassy they had put out a post on X. I want to read part of it for you because it's pretty striking. And essentially the embassy said, quote, "If war is what the U.S. wants, be it a tariff war, a trade war, or any type of war, we're ready to fight till the end." So clearly right there, not backing down. This was always the risk of going into imposing these tariffs. And we heard the conversation, a potential trade war. What would that happen? We're already seeing with Canada, for example, slapping tariffs on Canada coming back and slapping tariffs on us. So this seems to be escalating in some sense. We'll have to see what happens in the coming days. You mentioned President Trump making an about face on some of these tariffs. It's something that he sort of has done in the past. He's talked about using tariffs as a negotiating tactic, as a way to get other countries and other entities to do what he wants, threatening to put a tariff on the board, saying I'll take it off the board if you do A, B, and C, and then right before that deadline saying that the things he had laid out have been accomplished. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out in the coming days, particularly as we continue to see the stock market go up and down and up and down, and really a lot of sense go down. President Trump is somebody who knows Wall Street and knows the stock market, so prices going down, the stock market going down, that's not going to be something he wants to see.
One of those retaliatory tariffs that you mentioned from Canada, Ontario Premier Doug Ford announcing that they're going to tariff exports on electricity to the U.S. At what scale are these tariffs being implemented?
Still think we're trying to see and wait and see how that's going to play out, waiting to see how that's going to be implemented. But again, this gets back to what I was saying. This is the trade war that so many people were so concerned about. The U.S. places tariffs on Canada. Canada comes back and places tariffs on the U.S. And it could keep going for a while. And so this is why a lot of folks typically, sometimes a lot of folks don't like to go into tariffs. They like to have more of a free trade foreign policy and things like that. But again, the caveat with President Trump is that he likes to use these things as a negotiating tactic, which begs a sense of he could potentially pull back on them at any point. We're just going to have to keep an eye on it. It's that whiplash that you had just mentioned.
Some Republican lawmakers are starting to speak out about Trump's tariffs. Senate Majority Leader John Thune had this to say earlier this week.
So these tariffs, I think, are hopefully temporary. Obviously, I come from a state that is our number one industry is agriculture, so we care a lot about being able to export. A lot of our product in South Dakota hits the export market.
Senator Rand Paul also said earlier this week that Trump's threats are hurting his constituents. How long are we going to see this playing out with Republicans? Are they going to be backing Trump, or are there going to be more pushback? Is there going to be more pushback, maybe behind closed doors?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, we're already starting to see some of this criticism, or maybe not criticism, but concerns be raised. And it has a lot to do with, again, the whiplash that you mentioned. President Trump saying he's going to impose the tariffs. Well, maybe he's not. Then he puts the tariffs on. He scales back a bit. He carves out some areas with the tariffs. It's sort of been very much so a back and forth. I think a lot of this could potentially be driven by what constituents say, and we're already seeing this play out across the country. Those explosive town halls for some Republicans that we've seen, constituents raising concerns about things that DOJ has done, the potential for Medicaid cuts. It's very possible in the coming days and weeks we could see some concerns being raised about the stock market. people's 401ks? What do those look like? So I think that in part the Republican response could very much so be driven by what constituents say. And again, we're still seeing this play out. It could take a little bit of time, but the fact that we're already seeing some uneasiness from some Republican senators signals that there's definitely some concerns within the broader conference.
We are 1 week away from a government shutdown. Who's counting, though? Republicans are eyeing a continuing resolution. Where do we stand on negotiations at this point?
Yeah, we still haven't seen the text of the continuing resolution, though Speaker Johnson just a few minutes ago was on Fox News, and he said that he expects this to be on the floor on Tuesday. So mark your calendars, Tuesday, though, as we know in Congress, a lot of the times deadlines get pushed back and things get delayed. But nonetheless, Speaker Johnson plowing ahead with this idea of passing as a full year continuing resolution. Now, not 12 months, it'll go till the end of the fiscal year, till the end of September. This has been blessed by President Trump last week. He urged lawmakers to, quote, get it done, get this continuing resolution done. But there are still a lot of pieces that need to be put together in order for this to get over the finish line and avert a government shutdown. First off, can Johnson have his entire Republican conference united? There are a number of deficit hawks, hardline conservatives, many in the House Freedom Caucus, who are not fans of continuing resolutions historically. They don't like supporting these. They like to do regular order, passing the 12 appropriations bills. Well, in a really interesting dynamic that my colleague Emily Brooks and I wrote about this week, Freedom Caucus members are starting to warm up to this idea of a continuing resolution. Maybe it's because it would be inherently lower funding levels because it's the President Biden, the FY 2024's budget, or FY 2025 budget. Maybe it's because President Trump has blessed it. A lot of different factors, but that could be significant, Johnson getting all Republicans on board. And then perhaps even more of a thing to watch is what do Democrats do in this situation? There was actually a Dear Colleague letter from House Democratic leadership led by Hakeem Jeffries that went out this morning just a few minutes ago where they rail against what they're calling this partisan continuing resolution. Now, Republicans could potentially get this CR out of the House on their own. They have that slim majority. If everyone votes along party lines and there's full attendance, they can only afford to lose one person, which is extremely difficult in the House Republican Conference. But then there's the Senate, where you need the 60 votes. So you're going to need, if all Republicans support it, a good chunk of Democrats to get on board. A lot of open questions right now. And as you mentioned, we're just a week away from this funding deadline, and the threat of a shutdown is truly on the table.
You mentioned that Democrats might have to go it alone, or saying Republicans have to go it alone. And Hakeem Jeffries was speaking about. Here's what he had to say earlier this week.
A year-long continuing resolution is inconsistent with the Bipartisan Fiscal Responsibility Act. And so if Republicans decide to take this approach, as Speaker Johnson indicated, it's his expectation that Republicans are going it alone.
So are Democrats beginning to fine-tune their message in order to combat Trump?
It's a mixed bag. We'll have to see how this government funding deadline plays out. This is going to be a really big deal because this is essentially the last moment where Democrats have leverage in a fight up on Capitol Hill. A few caveats: if debt limit slips out of reconciliation, that could be a point of leverage. But this is really the big one that's on the table right now. How Democrats utilize this power and this authority over the next week is going to be very significant and could lay the foundation for how they move forward as a party. But it's a split screen. You have this messaging about the funding bill, and then you have what happened on Tuesday night during President Trump's first joint address to a joint session of Congress. That was not a great night for Democrats. You had Al Green stand up, wave his cane in the air, yell back at President Trump, get escorted out. We saw scores of Democrats. I was in the chamber watching from above, and I saw scores of Democrats throughout the speech walk out, hold up signs, protesting in different ways. Hakeem Jeffries had wanted, decorum going into that speech, and a lot of folks are saying that that wasn't the right way to message against President Trump. So I say that in most respects, I think Democrats are still picking up the pieces from November, still figuring out what their message is, a winning message could be going forward. And then the biggest question, Judy, who's going to hold that mantle as they walk forward with that message? Who is going to be the new face of the party? Democrats may be making some inroads on their message in some respects, but I think that the big picture, they still have a lot of work to do.
And Mychael Schnell always giving us the big picture. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Judy.
Amid the Trump administration's immigration crackdown, U.S. Border Patrol is working to eliminate an underground tunnel network that smugglers continue to use to move both people and drugs into the United States. NewsNation's Jorge Ventura rode along with the Border Patrol's Marine Unit as they patrolled the Rio Grande Valley and has an exclusive look into the fight to shut down tunneling operations for good.
Migrant encounters are down across the southern border, and Border Patrol agents now say that they are wrapping up efforts to dismantle human smuggling operations along the border. Agents say that smugglers are becoming more sophisticated, now using tunnels as a broader network of illegal entry points along that southern border. We got the opportunity to be embedded with the Marine unit in the Rio Grande Valley sector. These agents here are viewed as the first line of defense against illegal immigration and drug trafficking into the U.S. This is an area that is common for smugglers to use small rafts to get migrants across the river and onto American soil. But it's not just small rafts that agents are watching for here in the Rio Grande River, but smugglers have now taken their operations underground. Along the banks of the Rio Grande, we approached a makeshift tunnel that smugglers had been building out. They even installed a pipe before agents were able to locate it and seal it off with cement. Agents tell me that this makeshift tunnel was only halfway completed and never fully operational, but it's just one of the many as smugglers continue adapting their methods along the border. Then this, a drainage system that was once used by smugglers, according to Border Patrol agents. It's now blocked off by a cage placed by agents, but cartel operatives are still attempting to repurpose it. On that cage, you can actually see fresh cuts being made, clear signs that smugglers are testing weak points. And smugglers never stop along that system. They're also digging makeshift tunnels to connect to that drainage system, constantly looking for new ways to bypass Border Patrol agents.
Once they start digging holes like that, you gotta be extra careful and not just look at the actual drain, but look around, and that's how we found that other one.
Agents say they are remaining extra cautious because yet another tunnel had to be sealed off just nearby. Once agents uncovered it, they found 2x4s reinforcing the walls, even with a wooden door installed, showing just how much effort had gone into the construction. Agents say that smugglers come in the middle of the night and attempt to build out those makeshift tunnels. Now, the Marine unit, who we were embedded with in the Rio Grande Valley sector, is one of the most dangerous jobs within Border Patrol. While migrant counters are quieter on the border, agents say they are constantly being monitored by cartel scouts and smugglers on the Mexican side of the border. Cartel scouts are using high vantage points to track down the movements of Border Patrol agents. Agents say that this home here along the Rio Grande is one of many used by scouts to monitor the movements from a distance. And if you look closely, the second floor actually has a one-way mirror. This allows scouts to watch agents without being detected. From here, they can alert smugglers about the patrol activity along the river, giving them an advantage in avoiding arrest. Smugglers aren't just going underground, they're still using the river too. During our ride along, Border Patrol agents showed us what they call a landing area, where smugglers use small rafts to bring migrants right across. As soon as we arrived, we noticed fresh footprints in the sand, revealing recent illegal crossings in this area. Even with tunnels emerging, the Rio Grande remains a critical crossing point.
We come here every day, and you'll notice different things on the landings. So, for example, if we come here and check this landing wasn't used yesterday. We come the next day and there's something there.
And from my years covering the border and illegal immigration, it was my first time seeing a network of tunnels along the banks of the Rio Grande on the American side of the border, just once again showing how smugglers are trying to stay one step ahead of Border Patrol agents in a new crackdown on illegal immigration.
Thank you, Jorge Ventura. New allegations against hip-hop mogul Diddy Combs. On Thursday, prosecutors amended their indictment against Diddy to accuse the rapper of forced labor. That initial indictment last year charged Diddy with racketeering and sex trafficking. While no new official charges were added, prosecutors added several new details alleging that he forced his employees to work long hours with little sleep and would threaten those employees who did not aid his alleged trafficking ring. Diddy has repeatedly denied any wrongdoing and pleaded not guilty to those charges back in September. His case is set to go to trial in May. The news comes as the FDA declared last month that the shortage is over for Novo Nordisk weight loss and diabetes drugs Wegovy and Ozempic. Compounders have been allowed to produce and sell their own versions of anti-obesity drugs as long as the FDA considered them in short supply. Those compounded drugs are typically sold at significantly lower prices than the brand name versions. Eli Lilly said the decision marks the end of the road for mass compounding of risky, unapproved knockoffs that threaten the health and safety of Americans. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Judy Kurtz. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hills YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.